Hello, welcome back to Learn Oikonomia. Today we are going to discuss the concepts of economic growth and economic development. We will be separately looking at the concept of economic growth and economic development, and towards the end of the video we will be also seeing the difference between economic growth and economic development. Let's get started. Moving to the concept of economic growth and economic development, what we could see is that even though there exists a high correlation between economic growth and economic development, these two concepts are not the same. They are different from each other. When one of the concepts is related to the GDP of the nation, the other concept is related to several other parameters. We will see which one is related to the concept of GDP and which one is related to the other parameters. Moving to what is called economic growth. The term economic growth is considered as a total value of all the final goods and services which would be provided in an economy over a period of time. And GDP is one of the perfect examples, or this is the best example of economic growth indicator. We look at GDP of every nation and see whether GDP is increasing over the years or whether it is declining over the years. We will also look at something called growth rate of GDP and see how is it moving. We know that as a result of COVID pandemic, the GDP of every nation has shown a dip, but now the economy is in the revival state and economy is little by little picking up. Bit by bit we can see picking up of different economies. So the GDP will be giving us some growth picture regarding the economy. Moving to the updates regarding the very same, you can see that the World Bank on the 6th of October 2022 has cut its 2022-23, that is fiscal year 23 real GDP growth forecast for India from 6.5% to 7.5% to 6.5%. Actually, it has gone for a reduction. It was initially 7.5%, and from 7.5% the World Bank has gone for a cut to 6.5%. Okay. Now, moving to the importance of the concept of growth. It is something that is very much important with respect to employment. Whenever there is an increase in growth, this will be leading to increase in employment. And also, whenever there is an increase in growth, this will be increasing the tax revenue of the government. Whenever tax revenue of the government increases, this will be making the government to go for increased public spending. So the public spending also would increase. The spending by the government for various needs and wants of the economy would also increase. Okay, so also as a result of economic growth, we can see that there would be increase in consumption as well as increase in investment. How does consumption and investment increase? Because the income of the people would also increase, isn't it? With employment, there would be increase in income as well, and this will lead to increase in consumption as well as investment. Having discussed so much regarding economic growth, we are going to see the concept of economic development. It will deal with all positive changes in the economy which are related to the areas of social, economic and political arenas. Okay, so it will be covering several aspects in the economy. It will be looking at something called inequality aspect. It will be looking at something like standard of living of people. It would be looking at something like the poverty aspect, etc. So it is a combination of different social, economic and political factors that will be leading an economy to what is known as economic development. And economic development, as I have told you, is something which is very important for an economy. When it comes to progress of an economy, economic development is very much important. And for economic development to have, we should have certain features. And you can have certain features for economic development, and this will show increase or improvement in the standard of living of people in the economy. Whenever there is an increase in standard of living, what we mean is that there will be increase in the health facilities, or there will be improvement in the health facilities. Also, there would be improvement in health indicators. With respect to education also, we can have some improvement. There would be a reduction in the poverty levels. There would be reduction in inequality. etc. Now, economic development, as I have told you, it is something which is purely positive. It will involve some pure structural changes in the economy. And the process of economic development is also something that is never ending. This will increase the income of the economy. This will increase the standard of living of people in the economy, and altogether the nation will be progressing. Moving to the pillars of economic development, we can have something called education, we can have something called health, then there would be amenities, then there would be IT, then there would be environment, and so many more. Now, having considered economic growth and economic development separately, we are going to see the difference between economic growth and economic development. Whenever we look at economic growth, we consider the value of final goods and services of an economy over a given period of time. But economic development, as I told you, this is something where we consider some socio-economic parameters which will be looking at the improvement in the standard of living of people. Whenever economic growth is something which is short-term process, economic development is a long-term process. And economic growth is something that you can express in quantitative aspect, like what you can have in terms of GDP. But economic development is something which will go for a combination of both quantitative as well as qualitative aspects. You will be having elements of GDP, you will be having elements of literacy rate, and apart from that, you will be having some qualitative indicators like improvement in health facility, improvement in standard of living of people, reduction in inequality, reduction in poverty, etc. Now, moving to economic growth, it is having a narrow scope because it deals only with the economic growth of the nation. It is just concerned about the GDP of the nation. But moving to economic development, the scope of the very same is a bit wider. It will be covering both economic aspects as well as several other social and as well as political aspects. So the overall quality of life of people would be considered in economic development. Economic growth is mainly concerned with respect to developed economies, where economic development is something related to developing economies. And coming to the measurement of economic growth, I told you that we will be having something called GDP, we will be having something called the GNP or gross national product, so as to consider the economic growth. Economic development will be considering several other indicators like the green GDP, where you will take into consideration the environmental impact on GDP. You will be having gender inequality index, gender development index, gross happiness index, human development index, etc. Now, economic growth would be something which would reflect the national or per capita income. And this growth is what is considered in economic growth aspect. But when it comes to economic development, it shows the entire positive progress of the economy. It will look at the environmental aspect, it will look at the economic aspect, it will look at the political aspect, it will look at the social aspect, etc. Having said that, let's consider the factors that would be influencing the economic growth. There would be something called infrastructure. When you say infrastructure, you will be looking at the machineries that we have in the economy. It will be looking at the railways that we have in the economy. All these things will be leading to efficiency, and for the very same reason, this will lead to economies of scale as well. Again, we need optimum utilization of natural resources so as to promote economic growth, and resources are best utilized so as to reduce wastage. And whenever you reduce wastage, this will be gradually boosting the productivity. Now, next aspect is research and development. Increasing productivity of labor and reduction of cost. This is something that is simultaneously needed, and this would also influence economic growth. Also, another important factor that would influence economic growth is human capital. This would take into consideration the skills of people, the capacities of people, the capabilities of people, etc. Now, looking on to the factors influencing economic development, all the factors that would influence economic growth would also influence economic development, because economic growth is a part of economic development. Economic growth is a part of economic development. Okay. So human resource is one of the important factors that would influence economic development. We need education for increasing the efficiency of workforce. That too will be influencing economic development. We want something called certain indicators like infant mortality rate, maternal mortality rate, human poverty index, happiness index, etc., which will be giving us some kind of indication regarding the kind of economic development in the nation. And for the very same reason, we should collect data for all these things so as to have an assessment regarding the way in which our economy is progressing with respect to development. So economic development would be focusing on both qualitative as well as quantitative changes in the economy. I have already told about this. Now, having said about that, let's consider one of the important measures of development, that is green GDP. So we know that GDP is something that takes into consideration the value of all the final goods and services which is being produced in a nation in an accounting year, isn't it? Now, coming to the physical accounting of the very same, this would be helping to determine the kind of economic activity that is being there in the economy. But we have to consider certain other aspects as well. We have to consider the spatial aspect, temporal aspect, environmental aspect, etc. So the monetary valuation will be helping to ascertain the tangible and intangible components. The net change in natural resources is then integrated into the gross domestic product. So we are going to incorporate the net changes in the environmental environment to arrive at what is known as net change in environment or natural resources is integrated into the GDP of the nation so as to get what is called the green GDP. And now you are moving on to the gender inequality index, another important indicator of human development. Gender inequality index. This is something that gives us a true indication regarding the gender inequality situation in the nation. The gender inequality index measures gender inequality in the economy under three aspects. So it will be looking at what is called reproductive index or reproductive health. It will be looking at something called empowerment, and also it will be looking at something called the education aspect. Moving to reproductive health, this is measured by the maternal rate and adolescent birth rate. Then regarding the empowerment aspect, it is measured by the proportion of parliamentary seats which is given to the females, and also this they take in proportion to the seats which are given to the adult males. Moving to the education, it will cover females who are about 25 years with some secondary education. Now, moving to the next aspect, that is the gender development index. Again, it will be looking at some aspect like health, education and command over resources. Regarding health, it is something that will take into consideration the life expectancy aspect, life expectancy at birth. Regarding education, this is measured by female and male expected years of schooling and female and male mean years of schooling. Regarding expected years of schooling, we will be taking adults who are above, regarding expected years of schooling, we will be taking the case of children, and regarding the mean years of schooling, we will be taking the case of people who are about 25. And command over economic resources will be considered by male and female estimated earned income. Next is human capital index, another important indicator of development. So this will be acting as a tool for capturing the complexity of education, the complexity of employment, the complexity of workforce, etc. So this index will assess the learning and employment outcomes, and it is based on a particular scale, and the scale ranges between 0 and 100. If you are having a value which is closer to 0, it shows some worse performance, and if you are having a value which is closer to 100, it shows something called best performance. And you will be having the scale across 5 distinct age groups to capture the full demographic profile of the country. Next, we have to see the importance of growth and development in our economy. So this will be helping our nation to go for inter-region comparison, it will be helping various international organizations to go for inter-country comparisons. And also, whenever you go for comparison, this will also help us to formulate some policies by understanding the actual situation of the economy. It gives a true picture of the existing economy, which will be helping the various governments and international organizations to formulate right kind of policies. Economic development can be realized by economic growth of the economy, as financial aspects can be catered through the available information on economic parameters. Now, moving to the limitations of GDP. As I've told you, it is just a numerical value. It fails into consideration the uneven distribution of resources. It doesn't take into consideration something called negative externality. It does not even consider something which is called as unaccounted work. For example, the work done by households, work done by women in the household, the work done by elderly people in the household, the work done by even men will be doing certain kind of work in the household. This will not be considered. If you are doing the work in your own household, this will not be considered. And there is something called a parallel economy. This will be acting as a challenge to the computation of GDP. And freedom and social justice are not taken into consideration when you go for computation of GDP. And there might be some cases when an economy has higher growth rate, but the freedom, justice, etc. might be lacking. So that means high growth rate would be there, high GDP would be there, but there would be low development. Why such situation happens? This would be studied by various international organizations in various countries, and they will be trying to understand what is the real scenario and why it happens. And by understanding these things, they will try to give some remedy to it, or they will try to reduce such a situation. Moving to some issues in India with respect to growth and development, we can have something called illiteracy situation. Even now, we can have illiterate people in India. Again, poverty is one of the menaces that we can have in India. The growth rate is something that is declining, and that too is considered to be a problem. The inadequate growth in the secondary sector is considered to be another important issue. Then we can see that agriculture in India is still seen as a gamble of monsoon. It is still completely dependent on monsoon. Unemployment, underemployment, etc. situations are again another set of problems that we can have in the country. So that's all about the concept of growth, the concept of development, and the differences between the same. So thank you for watching, and you can join our Telegram community for free for your doubt clearance as well as question paper discussions. I'll be providing the link of the very same in the description box. You can consider this channel for liking, sharing as well as subscribing. Thank you for watching.